Hi, I'm Rebecca Brody. I'm the conference producer for the MedTech Summit, and I'm here joined today by Annemien Pullen, the Director of Strategy for Vault Medical Devices and Diagnostics at Veeva Systems. Annemien Pullen, you are the Director of Strategy Medical Devices with more than 10 years experience in the industry. She has a deep understanding of the ETE device development process and regulatory transformation. After her PhD in organisational collaboration in medical device product development, she led a number of business transformation programmes. Before joining Veeva, Annemien was an associate partner at EY and a subject matter expert in the area of the new EU MDR and IVDR. In that capacity, she has worked with many of the global top 10 medical device manufacturers on their MDR programmes. So thank you very much for joining me today, Annemien.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, we have a few questions that I wanted to ask. So firstly, your session during the MedTech Summit focuses on how technology can simplify compliance. With a new set of regulations coming into force next May, how can medical device companies prepare better for these changes, and what should they be focusing on first?
Yes, thank you so much, Rebecca, for the question. Well, I think the main focus should really be on solving current regulatory challenges first. And those are things like the spread of data across an organization, or the lack of consistency between information that's being used in multiple places and in multiple reports. But it's really all those challenges that impact the current level of compliance. I think it's key that that's really approached in a structural way instead of through short-term workarounds. And now, of course, with COVID-19, we're in a very special situation because some projects are on hold, budgets are tight, because the future is not as well known maybe as normally. Now, but what continues is global regulatory change. And even though, for instance, with MDR, the date of application has been postponed by a year, it will still happen. It's not going away. So really a structural change in regulatory operations, I would regard it as an investment actually in organizational sustainability, and a workaround that might work perfectly well in the short term and it might do the trick, but in the end, it's just an additional short-term cost. It's not a solid investment. So therefore, I think that if you would apply really a structural approach to implementing changes that are focused on changing your regulatory operating model, and you would leverage technology in such a way that you have one global tool that really enables the end-to-end regulatory process, but also that would scale up or down with your organization as you would grow or divest, or well, think of anything that impacts scaling up or down, then you would really set yourself up for success. But you can also continuously monitor your environment in a more proactive way, rather than in a reactive way where you would respond to audit findings or non-conformities. And I think that's something that you would prefer to prevent from happening overall.
So how can technologies help companies to shift from this reactive to proactive management approach that you talked about?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think technology is not a goal in itself, but it's really an enabler to optimize the end-to-end regulatory process in very different ways. So it would, for instance, harmonize your business processes across the different parts of the organization, but also different geographies, locations, business units, if you would use one global tool. And that would also allow your leadership teams to have real-time insights into the process and to really support decision-making. But it would also increase efficiency throughout the regulatory process, because you don't lose time looking for the latest version or just searching for the data that is stored in all these different systems. So that would really increase your efficiency. But what I think is really interesting, that if you have an appropriate and a vigorous RIM system that would also allow you to track health authority correspondence, it allows you to actually trend that health authority correspondence with regard to the different topics or the different focus areas that are part of the health authority questions. And that insight improves the quality of your submission documents, and that would also reduces your time to market, because many of the questions or concerns can already be tackled in the first submission, because you're basically you have a proactive response to that, and you can anticipate better what questions might be asked. And if you tackle that in the first submission, that might speed up your time to market, but it would also continuously improve the learning and the knowledge in the regulatory teams. And now on top of that, it would also allow your regulatory teams to really focus on regulatory strategy, regulatory intelligence, really the value-adding tasks that I would say these highly skilled professionals are trained to do, rather than a broad, I would say, variety of more admin tasks. But I'd say really the main thing is that when you would have your process under control, and if you would leverage the appropriate technology, your number of non-compliance, I would say, issues that are caused by human error or that are caused by a lack of insight will decrease. And that really allows you to move away from reacting to non-compliance issues to proactively focusing on maintaining compliance 24/7.
And I think all companies want to have a proactive management approach. So when they're selecting and implementing technology to support a sustainable approach that you've mentioned, what are the key areas companies should pay extra attention to?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because selection and implementation of the appropriate system, that really requires focus, but also, of course, a thorough analysis on what you would actually need. So first thing I think that you have to think about and take into account is the level of security of the system, because it will be your single source of truth for your sensitive regulatory documentation, but also the process data. So the level of security is really the first thing to think about. But you also have to understand how different users will collaborate in the system, not only internally, but I think increasingly important also externally. And well, just to give you a few examples of that, for instance, the revised economic operator obligations that are, I would say, that are included in the new MDR. That means that some of your economic operators need to access your RIM system or have access to all the documents and data that's stored in there to basically meet their obligations and their requirements. But as an organization, you really want to make sure it's possible, but only with appropriate access rights and also only with the appropriate permissions. You don't want to open up the entire system, but just a portion of it to make sure your economic operators meet their requirements as well. Another example that I think is more common nowadays, or is becoming more common nowadays, is working together with your notified body in remote audits. So where you can already prepare the documents that the notified body has to review to prepare for the audit by making sure your notified body has access to your RIM system, but again, only for a specific portion, only for the documents that you want them to see, instead of using email to correspond and to go back and forth with. Now, another pitfall or thing to really watch out for is the usability of the system, because just when something is called modern, it doesn't mean it's easy to use. And if you don't have a user interface that's really intuitive or easy to navigate in, user adoption might be a big challenge. And if you have a global tool that only a few people use, you just don't get the value out of it that it can bring you. Now, and finally, and might be a little bit an open door, but of course you need to have a system or technology in place that really supports your end-to-end regulatory process. So that means that system is not only just a repository for your regulatory data, but it's really a tool in which you can, for instance, jointly draft your submission documents, you plan your submissions, but you can also relate your product registrations to your submission documents. And also what I just said, also to track your health correspondence, but all these other tasks that are part of the whole regulatory process. That should be supported by that system. So yeah, so I think those are, at least in some, really the key areas that you should focus on when you select, but also when you implement a vigorous RIM system.
Well, thank you for all those points. You've brought some excellent topics to the table, and if anyone wants to hear more from you, you have a presentation on Monday afternoon in the EU MDR track, which is how technology can simplify compliance in the world of global regulatory changes. But thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much.